Excuse me. There. Technology can be just a little slow sometimes. And let's get the screen shared with our text. Times. Okay, just let me match a few video screens to the right spots. Okay, we are now ready to go. All right, 12 o'clock. Too early. The technology didn't fight me as much as usual today. So we will give it just a brief pause before we jump in, just as I delay things long enough to let people who are coming in through the YouTube link take care of that. It's not an instant process, unfortunately. If only. But it still gives us a chance to study together in a way that wasn't possible even 10 years ago, let alone 1,000 or two. All right, so I think we've now given our buffer long enough for people to log in. Let's go ahead and get started. So we are picking up in Tazria Metzora, which is one of those sections of the Torah that many people find difficult to discuss. We talked about this in last week's Torah portion, how even though the majority of the issues that are found throughout this section of Torah are not applicable in day-to-day life, nonetheless, that there is great value in still learning and studying them. And we are going to put that to the test as we dive into chapter 15, because there are topics here that most people are uncomfortable discussing with their doctor, let alone with their rabbi, each other, or feeling that there is a spiritual component to it. But that is, of course, one of the great lessons of Judaism, is that we, by virtue of being one of God's creations, are a spiritual component for the world. And thus everything in the world, including our own bodies and its more intimate workings, has a layer of spirituality to be discussed. And so with that in mind, and with a certain sensitivity, and depending upon the age of any children that might be listening, I'll let you have your own discretion on that. Let's go ahead and get started after I remove whatever it is that's in my eye. Okay. Chapter 15, verse 1. Adonai spoke to Moshe and Aharon, saying, "Speak to the children of Israel and say to them, any man, the word ish is repeated twice, when he becomes one with a flow," that is, Fox's attempt to translate the word zav into a phrase, because there is no singular English word that conveys exactly the same elements. So when you see that hyphens, it means in Hebrew, there is one word. In English, we've got four. So when you become one with the flow from his flesh, and as he points out by using quotations around the word flesh, we are talking literally with the word flesh, but euphemistically of the part of the anatomy from which a flow could come in a most disturbing kind of way. That is to say, male genitalia. So if you are a man and you have this flow from that place, then his flow, it is tameh, meaning that now we are in a state of ritual impurity. And we're going to go through this in a minute. I just want to make sure that we got the basic idea here, is that there are certain flows, discharges, leakages from that part of the male body, and comparable for women, that when they are flowing in different ways will create different categories, different levels of ritual impurity, what we call tum'ah. And just like I talked about last week, we're going to try to use the word tameh, tum'ah, adjectives and nouns as much as possible, because the English is fraught with cultural baggage that is not our own. But I will keep using the English from time to time just to make sure that everybody's keeping up. All right, so this type of flow creates a ritual impurity situation. But this is his tuma, his ritual impurity during his flow. Whether his flesh, that is to say, that part of the body, oozes with his flow, or his flesh is sealed up by his flow, it is his tuma. Sealed up means that there is a blockage at the opening because of the congealing of the bodily fluid. Verse 4. So with that in mind, what are the implications of the ritual impurity, regardless of which variety it is? Well, verse 4 begins the process of telling that. Any place of lying, again, have hyphens, that means it's one word in Hebrew with a longer version needed in the English. So hamishkav here is literally a place of lying, but it means a place that is used for lying down, such as a bed. Any place of lying that one with a flow lies on becomes tameh, meaning that is now it is now a source of a lesser degree of ritual impurity than it was before he lay down on it. And likewise, any vessel that he sits on becomes tameh. That is to say, there are places where you lie down, a bed, there are things that you sit upon, such as a saddle, and when somebody with this condition is upon either of them, those items become ritually impure. Onward. A man that touches his place of lying is to scrub his garments and wash in water and will remain tameh until sunset. So now if you have somebody else that touches that place where the person who was ritually impure had been lying, once you have touched it, you have to scrub and you wash, and then your ritual impurity will remove itself at eventide. So there is an expiration time built into this once the procedure has been followed. So the ritual impurity here is easier to remove. Verse 6, one who sits on the vessel on which the one who with the flow sits is to scrub his garments and wash in water and will remain tameh until sunset. Also, this is how we handle when you have sat on the same place that somebody else sat that had this ritual impurity. I will remind everybody again that this category of tuma, the process of becoming tameh, is not relevant in the modern world in a legal sense. We're going to try and figure out what we can learn from it, but don't worry about observing these particular mitzvot because they are not relevant under our current situation. Verse 7. One who touches the flesh of the one with the flow is to scrub his garments and wash in water and will remain tameh until sunset. So you give somebody a hug and then you find out that they were in this particular way, then this is the repercussions of that. Now, on verse 8, if one with a flow spits on one who is pure, doesn't have to be intentional. This spittle can happen just on its own sometimes. That one, meaning the person upon whom it landed, is to scrub his garments and wash in water and will remain tameh until sunset. And any saddle mounting that one with a flow mounts becomes tameh. Anyone who touches anything that is under him will remain tameh until sunset. One who carries them is to scrub his garment and wash in water and will remain tameh until sunset. So hopefully you're getting the whole idea here that there is a degree of ritual impurity. Now, before we go on for our commentary, I want to make sure that we understand that when we are talking about somebody being tameh, ritually impure, that we are not saying that they have done something wrong. The body does what the body does, and this is not indicative of any spiritual flaw. It is not indicative of any particular crime or sin. This is simply what is going on. Nonetheless, Judaism does consider that our bodies are something that can create, under less than ideal circumstances, a situation of ritual impurity, which has, well, this is all as far as the ramification. A person is not hunted like a witch. A person is not accused of something as though they are under a curse by God. Instead, it simply means that there is a process for somebody to become tahor, ritually pure, once this has taken place. And in the meantime, while a person is tameh, they are not allowed to engage and involve themselves in the ritual sacrifices and other mishkan, tabernacle or temple activities. That's it. That things that are sacred become more distant, but there is no other repercussion, even in the days when we were actually being careful and particular about these particular issues. So just want to make sure that that's really, really clear, because we're about to look at a list of all the things that can cause ritual impurity, which go far beyond what we've read so far in the first 10 verses of chapter 15. And I want to make sure that we understand that the implications of being ritually impure are purely to do with ritual. That's why I like to use the word ritually impure in English for tuma or tameh for the adjective, in order to make sure that people recognize this is connected only to the ritual activities. That doesn't make it trivial. Certainly this was critical in days when the ritual activities were taking place, but I want to make sure that we are still trying to fight and separate it from the cultural baggage of the word impure as it gets used in modern English. Okay, with that in mind, let's jump into our commentary, where we're going to see a list of all the different things that can create ritual impurity of different degrees. We're not going to go through what the meaning of those different degrees are, but the short answer is that there are some things that, when they create impurity, will have a lasting effect on those that come into contact that will then be spread to others. And there are some things that, once you have come into contact with that impurity, you may or may not spread it to others under different circumstances, like we were just looking at with the sitting or the lying upon things. And that is a very, very complicated part of Jewish law, and that we are not going to spend our time on today. Certainly, if you want to learn more about that, I can point you to the relevant sections of Mishnah Torah or other Jewish law codes. But for now, let's just look at things that can cause ritual impurity so that we can try and ascertain a pattern from this. As we discussed last week, we should always have a healthy dose of uncertainty, that we should always be scratching our head and saying, well, it looks like it might be this, but recognized with our humility that we do not have the answer, neither for the good, meaning we can explain everything as perfect and beautiful and wonderful, nor for those that come to criticize or scoff, that think that they have an answer that explains why all of this is rubbish. Neither side is showing proper humility. So, the list. A person who touches a corpse, a person who touches something that has been made impure by a corpse, a person who touches or carries carrion, a person who touches or shifts the carcass of one of the 8 sheratzim, the creeping animals. We talked about those in last week's Torah portion. Also, a vessel or clay oven upon which falls one of these carcasses, meaning of the creepy crawlies, the sheratzim. A woman, upon giving birth, becomes impure for 7 days if she gave birth to a son, or 14 days for a daughter. A person who was diagnosed with tzara'at, which is the condition that is discussed in the earlier part of this week's Torah portion, often mistranslated as leprosy, but it is not, neither in its symptoms nor in its conduct. A house and its contents, which have been diagnosed with tzara'at. Famously, of course, you can't get leprosy in a house, and yet you can get tzara'at. A man or woman with an unnatural emission, which is what we're talking about here, from the genitals. A zav, that's the male form, or a zava, that's the female form. Or a menstruating woman, nida. A person who touches them, or who touches their chair or vessels that they touch, is also impure, like we've just been discussing. A man who has had a seminal discharge, or a garment touched by semen. This is to say a more regular type of discharge. A person who eats meat of animals that have died of themselves, just fell over dead, or have been killed by beasts. Those are not just not kosher, but they also create ritual impurity. A priest who performs certain roles in the red heifer sacrifice. Quite oddly, the red heifer sacrifice is a way of making another person ritually pure after they had come into contact with a corpse, but the person who helps prepare that process becomes tameh, becomes ritually impure himself. And If a corpse is present in a house, people and objects within the house become impure. And we have all of our citations there if you want to go look up the details of those in the Torah itself and the commentary and halakha and all the other things that go along with them. All right, so that's a nice abbreviated list of the different things. And there are a couple of things that we could say about this. But the one that I want to focus on today is that when we look at the things that cause ritual impurity, they are things that are of the most basic, most bodily elements of ourselves, and in many ways are connected to our most instinctual sort of self. We're going to pull that apart in much more detail with the commentary, but just sort of let me run through the list, skipping a little bit to try and make my point clear so that you can have it in mind when we look through our Talmud section. So we are human and we are spiritual and we are eternal, but we also die. And that's number one on the list, is that a human body creates ritual impurity. And that is because the death of a human is one of the starkest reminders of our essential material nature, as opposed to our spiritual existence. Likewise, things that come into contact or things that represent death, such as carrion or an animal that has died of its own account, but also things that are involving us in our more basic, almost animal level of humanity, such as giving birth, or things that are connected to our acts of intimacy, or the cycle of not wrong, not bad, not problematic, but they are stark reminders of our material existence. And as such, these things on this whole list stand as potential disruptions of our spiritual balance. That when we are confronted with, when we are in contact with, when we are put in a position where we have to deal with our more material and animal level of existence, oftentimes it will shake us in our spiritual understanding of our place in the world. And as such, we need a remedy after those events to help rebalance us. Again, doesn't mean that anything on this list is in and of itself wrong. Far from it. As we've talked about, many of the things on this list are actual commandments that we must engage in, such as burying the dead or taking care of the red heifer ritual, and obviously having children. But we have to acknowledge that they are exceptionally likely to cause disruption in our sense of self. And the rituals that are there to provide to become tahor again, to become ritually pure, are there to help us rebalance. Now, that's sort of the high level looking at it. Let's take a look at an example from Talmud that, in its own way, I think will reinforce this discussion. So let's get us down into a good place. And Rav Huna said that Rav said, chain of tradition, in the name of Rabbi Meir, one's words should always be few before the Holy One, blessed be he, as it is stated. So make sure we got the synopsis before the proof text. When somebody is engaging in prayer or in conversation, you shouldn't talk over much. You might think that it would be wonderful to just keep going blah, blah, blah about how wonderful God is, but honestly, the more we say, the more likely we are to go off. So keeping things to a minimum, good idea. What's the proof text for this? Well, it comes from Kohelet, the book of Ecclesiastes. Be not rash with your mouth, and let not your heart be hasty to utter a word before God. For God is in heaven, and you upon earth, therefore let your words be few. Ecclesiastes, as always, biting and cutting to the chase. I get that you want to talk to God, but for a moment, before you open your mouth, realize how incredibly chutzpahdik, how audacious that is. You are some material, earthy, barely better than an animal kind of creature, and God is, well, God. You're going to open your mouth? What are you possibly going to say? that if you would be tongue-tied before a movie star or before some powerful politician or business person at the top of their career, are you not tongue-tied before the Almighty? So Ecclesiastes is always bringing us back to reality in this way and trying to say, not that you shouldn't talk to God, but that before you speak, really be careful about what you are about to say, that you should be hesitant, but then go through with it. Now, this is going to get interpreted. Rav Nachman bar Rav Chisda interpreted homiletically. What is the meaning of that which is written? Then the Lord formed, Vayitzer Adam. So this is from Genesis 2, where we have Adam Harishon, the first human being carved out of the earth. But why is this written with a double yud? It doesn't come through great in the transliteration, but Vayitzer, that double Y there, is representing the fact that it is written with an extra yud, more yuds than would be normally needed for the correct spelling of the word. Well, this double yud alludes to the fact that the Holy One, blessed be He, created two inclinations. One, a good inclination, and one, an evil inclination. All right, let's talk about the Yetzer HaTov and the Yetzer Hara, the good inclination and evil inclination, a little bit before we continue. In Judaism and rabbinic teachings, we have this concept of a Yetzer HaTov, an inclination to do good, and a Yetzer Hara, an inclination to do evil. However, those English words don't do them justice, because as they are talked about in our tradition, it is not an inclination to do evil like the devil on your shoulder from a Bugs Bunny cartoon that is telling you while twirling a mustache, go out and do crime. This is instead a Yetzer Hara, an inclination that, when followed, leads us into bad outcomes, as opposed to the Yetzer HaTov, which again isn't just a little angel being all saintly and pure, but is instead, when we follow that inclination, we end up with much better results. So, what is the evil inclination, the Yetzer Hara, often trying to do? Well, the evil inclination is often trying to make us behave in ways that are, we would call in a pejorative sense, self-serving, selfish, greedy, dominating, acquisitive. The Yetzer Hara is essentially a source of universal and insatiable appetite. And that in and of itself is not the problem. What's wrong is that when we follow it, well, once a person decides that they need more and more and more, they are more prone to commit crimes to do it, for example. If I think that I'll be happy if I just have a few more $1 million, or that somebody will love me if I give them really expensive gifts and I can't afford it right now, then I might be tempted to steal in order to be able to do that, or to behave corruptly in my business and defraud others, or steal wages from workers, or other things the Torah prohibits in order to fill that need, that inclination. Well, that is obviously going to be an evil outcome, and that's why it's called the Yetzer Hara. Now, back into the commentary, what are we doing with this two inclinations out of how we were formed? What is this talking about? And does everybody agree? Well, Rabbi Nachman bar Yitzchak has a very important objection. If that is so, meaning that if that double yud shows that for us, we have a double inclination, one for good, one for bad, then what does that mean for animals? Because does an animal, with regard to whom Vayitzer is not written with a double yud, not have an inclination? And this is where we can really understand that when we're talking about the Yetzer, this inclination, that it is not good or bad purely in a moral sense by itself, but only in how we implement it. Because Rabbi Nachman is asking, a little bit rhetorically, don't animals also have inclinations, what we might call in modern English instincts? Animals behave, animals do things, right? Don't we see that it causes damages and bites and kicks? It does stuff that causes hurt. It does things that cause bad, ra, evil. Again, this isn't evil with a twirling mustache and little devil on the shoulder evil. This is evil meaning it's really bad that this happened. And it doesn't have to have been the moral plan of the animal to cause this to happen, but animals do behave according to their own instincts in ways that can cause evil results for the people and other animals around them. So clearly, says Rabbi Nachman Bar Yitzchak, animals have some kind of instinct. They are behaving. And by behaving, that shows that there is something that is governing their behavior. They are not purely random, and they are not purely passive. There is some structure. There is, in modern term, an algorithm going on within the creature, and therefore you can't say that only Adam, only humanity, has inclinations. Animals have to have inclinations as well. Okay, now, apart from that being exceptionally good at helping us understand that the evil inclination is not about cartoon evil, but is about behaving in ways that cause negative outcomes for ourselves and others, it also then leads us to this understanding of, well, what is it to really be human compared to other animals or not? And that is going to be the second half of Rabbi Nachman's idea. Rather than interpreting it according to double yud means two inclinations, instead, interpret the double yud homiletically in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Shimon ben Pazi. As Rabbi Shimon ben Pazi said, this alludes to the difficulty of human life. Woe unto me from my creator, Yotzri, and woe unto me from my inclination, Yitzri. That is to say, if one opts to follow either his creator or his inclination, woe unto him from the other. All right, so what is Rabbi Shimon ben Pazi trying to say? He is saying that unlike animals who just behave, as a human, we are trapped, if you will, between two masters. We have that which created us, right? Yotzri, that's one yod, which is God. And God created us to be this incredible, amazing creature that has a drive towards good and is able to govern our lives in ways that bring blessing to ourselves and others. But we are made of stuff. We are physical creatures, and as such, we share much with animals, and we share certain instincts and inclinations that also pull us to certain other behavior patterns. That is our yitzri, that is our inclinations. Well, you might think that all you've got to do to be a good person is just ignore that inclination that comes from the more animal side of you. But Rabbi Shimon ben Pazi quite astutely is pointing out that's not so easy, because oy, right, or voy, if you want in the Hebrew, as an oy vavoy, you might have heard as a classic Yiddish type expression. When you try to just behave good, you are still going to be badgered. You are still going to be pulled. You are still going to, in some manner, suffer, because your other inclination is going to be saying, why are you doing that? Why are you being a sucker? Don't do that. Come on, just live a little. Don't be so uptight. Just, it's not going to cause any harm, really. And those thoughts will continue to prey upon us. Of course, we can't just give in and then our life will be easy, because being human, life ain't easy. Rabbi Shimon ben Pazi says if we gave in to the Yitzri, if we were doing just our instinctual behavior and acting as though we were just an animal on that autopilot, well, we are still human, and we will still be pulled by Yotzri, by my creator, in the other direction as well. So we will not find perfect peace, in this world at least, between those two poles within our life. That's P-U-L-L, those pulling forces within our life. And that is something that is being hinted at here with how we were created with this double yud in that verb, that we are being created to always be pulled in both directions. And when we give to one, we will feel ache from the other. That doesn't mean that we've done wrong by doing what is right. It just means that we are struggling to overcome. It's the ache that comes in your body after a good day's exercise or of hard labor in a constructive and meaningful way. Doesn't mean you shouldn't have exercised. Doesn't mean you shouldn't have done whatever work you were doing. but it does mean that as a human being, your body is going to ache a little when you have exerted it to its fullest. And that's something that's going to happen to us when we're trying to do good. And as a good reminder, even when we do wrong and giving in, we may think we're taking the easy path, but our conscience is going to continue to badger us. Now, you're probably wondering, Rabbi Neely, what does all this have to do with impurity? Well, the whole idea of things that are tameh is that those are things that are connected more to our animal side. Again, that doesn't make it evil in itself, but it does mean that it's connected to things that make us acutely aware of the fact that we are 99% animal in physical form. And as such, it is likely that while we engage in those, we will be more leaning in that direction. And as such, we need a ritual, a form of transition back to being tahor, ritually pure, in order to counter that out. And as such, we have all of our purity legislation with all of its details. In the modern world, of course, we're not going to be engaging in all of those details and rituals, just a few, but we can still be on alert that when we come into contact with some of these other issues, that we balance ourselves again, at least mentally, at least spiritually, so that we are not drifting only towards that more animal side of our nature. And when we are doing good, we shouldn't be surprised that we get a few complaints from within that part of ourselves, because that's kind of what it's there for. But we are capable of overcoming it. Now, all of this is said much more clearly, but I have to still explain it my own way, by the great 20th century Jewish philosopher known as Immanuel Levinas, who is a wonderful person for helping to cast Jewish thinking in more modern language. The word vayitzer, broken down into vayitzer, would mean woe to the creature, unpacking the text that we just looked at. Vay, as in oy vavoy, an interjection like alas is common in popular Jewish speech, notably in Yiddish, like I mentioned. Woe to the creature, woe when I obey my creator. For obeying my creator, I am constantly disrupted by my creaturely nature. But woe is to me also when I obey my essence as creature, my inclinations. I am still torn, but this time not between the right and the left as a sign of my freedom, but between the high and the low, between the law and nature, between the creator and the condition of creature. To be man remains as dramatic as the conflict between opposing passions. So beautifully put, Levinas is trying to highlight everything I just said in much clunkier English, that this tension is what it is to be human, that we are created and we have a relationship with our creator. And we are unique in that, as far as creatures on this planet, as far as we can tell. Everything is created, but not everything has the capacity for relationship with the creator. But that tension then creates, well, some discomfort within us. But out of that discomfort can come great meaning and great purpose. Now, I don't want to leave it there, although we could wrap it up. And if you're pressed for time, go ahead and hit pause and you can get on with the rest of your day. But in this section of the Talmud, they go further into this discussion of what it meant that we were created in this particular way. And that there is more going on here than just a discussion of our inclinations, although we are going to circle back to that by the time we're done. So let's take a look at where our tradition goes from there. Alternatively, again, a great reminder that our tradition always has room for new interpretations. We are continuing our discussion in the Talmud. This duplication in the language of creation can be explained in accordance with the statement of Rabbi Yirmiyah ben Elazar. As Rabbi Yirmiyah ben Elazar said, the Holy One, blessed be He, created two faces, du partsufim, on the first human. He was created both male and female in a single body. As it is stated, you have formed me, sartani, behind and before, taken from Psalm 139. Sartani is derived from the word surah, meaning a face. God formed two faces on a single creation, back and front. So this is a common element within Jewish teaching about Adam Rishon, the first human being, that first human was actually created both male and female at the same time. And created in this way is emphasizing the idea that there would have been two faces, a male face and a female face, that later had to be divided, as we'll talk about. So this is not a new interpretation by any stretch of the imagination. And to go on for that interpretation, it is stated, and the Sela, which the Lord God has taken from the human, he made a woman and brought her unto the human. Sela often gets translated incorrectly in Hebrew, in English, from the Hebrew as rib. Certainly that has become the common version in Christianity to talk about. Judaism was not so sure of exactly which part was taken. Sela is more generally described in Hebrew as meaning a side of some kind. Now, from the side could mean a rib, but it doesn't have to be a rib. That is a choice of interpreters. So instead, Rav and Shmuel disagree over the meaning of this word Sela. One said it means face, meaning Eve was originally one face or side of Adam. This doesn't have to mean necessarily face, just the part that's, here on the top of our head, but one face like the face of a cube, if you go back to your geometry class, meaning one whole side of the first creature known as Adam would be a woman, and one whole side would be a man. You can think Siamese twins, if you like. You can think two people that are sort of smushed front and back to each other. There's many different ways to try and conceptualize what they are discussing here. And the other one said it means tail, which he explains to mean that the Sela was an appendage. Rather than thinking these are two sides of the entire whole, instead think there was the whole and then a second whole that was created through an appendage, something that was extra, not something that was welded all the way together. The Gemara analyzes this dispute. Granted, meaning, okay, it makes sense. According to the one who said that Sela means face, meaning a whole side, that is why it is written, you have formed me, Sartani, behind and before, right? Behind and before, two sides. So that seems like it fits that verse pretty well. However, according to the one who said that Sela means tail, what is meant by the verse, you have formed me behind and before? This is typical Talmudic analysis. Often it's done more for legal purposes, but here it's being done for the philosophy, which is to say, if you have two opinions and they're analyzing a verse, you can say, well, opinion A matches that verse quite easily, but opinion B does not seem to. How would opinion B answer that challenge? Well, here's the answer. It can be explained in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Ami. As Rabbi Ami said, behind means Adam was created at the end of the act of creation. The last thing God created was humanity. And before means that he was the first to be punished. Because when we come to the section of Genesis where there is the punishment of Adam and Chava, Adam and Eve, Adam gets mentioned last in the list of people who made mistakes, but he is mentioned first in the list of people who are actually getting their punishments. So therefore, we have behind and before. Now, is this true? Is this like legally binding? Is this like there is only one right answer? No, that's not how Talmud works. Instead, both of them have substantiated that their interpretation, that a tail versus a face, both can work with this other verse. And so we would look to other ways of trying to differentiate between the two to see if one has a stronger claim based off some other analysis or evidence. However, we are going to jump a little bit in the Talmud. That's why I have the ellipse there, where they come back to this whole idea of what does it mean that we were made out of this Sela, of this side, this appendage. The Gemara responds, this must be interpreted homiletically, of course, in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Shimon ben Manasseh. As Rabbi Shimon ben Manasseh interpreted homiletically, what is the meaning of that which is written? And the Lord God built the Sela, right? That God took the Sela, tail or side, take your pick, and then built it up to be what we would then call Eve, well, this verse teaches that the Holy One, blessed be he braided Eve's hair and then brought her to Adam, as in the coastal towns, they call braiding hair building. All right, lovely little play on words here. That when it says that God built up the side, if the side was a whole side, meaning an entire like separate person, and all God did was move them apart in order that there could be two people, then what building is going on there, right? That seems like just a quick snip and we're good. Excuse me. Certainly easy enough for God. Well, the building here is actually, is being argued by Rabbi Shimon, is being used as a usage of the idiom from some of the coastal towns, surfer kids, where building is one of their synonyms for braiding hair. Now, you might be thinking, why would God be braiding Eve's hair? Well, again, this isn't because God is sitting down and braiding with fingers, because God doesn't have a body, God doesn't have hands. And what it means is also not just that Eve's hair was braided and nice. What it means is that God would, of course, want to present Eve as something that was pleasant and good. I'll tell you, a lot of people, when they are confronted with a part of themselves, often don't like it. And if Eve was a face of Adam, that is to say, if they were two parts and now they are being turned so they are seeing each other clearly, they might not appreciate what they are seeing. However, by building her up, by preparing her, this made it easier for the couple to actually get along with each other. So this building here is more in the notion of supporting them in their relationship, which is reinforced by the next interpretation of this. And with regard to the verse, and brought her unto the human, meaning Adam, Rabbi Yirmiyah ben Elazar said, this verse teaches that the Holy One, blessed be he, was Adam, the first man's best man. That this is a wedding, because after all, Adam and Chava have to get married, because no hanky-panky without that. But how is that going to happen when you don't have the traditional structure of a marriage? Who's going to be officiating? Well, God is obviously doing that, but God is also acting in the traditional manner of bringing the couple together, acting as what we would call the best man. From here, the Torah taught that it is a desired mode of behavior for a greater individual to seek out a lesser individual to assist him and serve as his best man. The greater individual should help the lesser and should not feel badly about it, that it might be beneath his dignity. If God, who is infinitely wonderful, can stoop, because anything less than God is stooping, to helping out Adam, then certainly the rest of us shouldn't stand on our honor and dignity when it comes to helping other people as well. We should always be eager and willing to help other people regardless of our status. Indeed, because of our status, we're probably capable of giving more help, and thus it is even more incumbent upon us to do that. So again, this isn't about trying to recreate a wedding video for Adam and Eve and God acting as a best man in some sort of comic way. This is about trying to teach us about how we behave. We would braid the hair of someone to help make them a happy and successful couple. We would build up somebody in order to make that a good relationship. We would, quote, lower ourselves to help somebody act as their best man and help them with the wedding preparations or anything else needed in order to bring them together in happiness. And all of that is acting in a way that emulates God and is by no stretch of the imagination is demeaning to us. Now, I told you we'd come back to our inclinations, and that is what we're going to finish off with in our final paragraph here. The Gemara asks, and according to the one who said that Eve was a face of or side of Adam, which one of them walked in front? The burning question of all theology. If they are two people, well, who gets to go in front and who's coming behind? Well, Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak said, it is reasonable, again, he's saying it's just by logic, to say that a man walked in front. As it is taught in a Braita, a man should not walk behind a woman on a path, as he will look at her constantly, even if it is his wife. If a woman happens upon him alone along a bridge, he should walk quickly in order to move her to the sides, so that she will not walk in front of him. And anyone who walks behind a woman in a river in order to see her exposed skin when she lifts her clothing as she passes through the water has no portion in the world to come. Now, come back to the hyperbole of the final phrase, but what Rav Nachman here is trying to remind us is that even though this woman, Eve, was part of Adam, we have to use this as a moment to remind ourselves of how not to objectify women, that walking behind someone to leer at them, or walking behind them in the river so that we could see them in those circumstances is a really despicable thing. Now, is it a despicable thing just in and of itself, or is it despicable because it is giving our inclination extra food? We are building up that part of us that is a little more animalistic, that we are looking at that person as though they were a potential mate or breeding partner rather than as a human being. And unfortunately, for many people, they will need to put in place certain guards, whether it be not walking immediately behind or moving to one side, in order that they can avoid that inclination within them. You will notice, however, that it is not actually saying the woman has to change because of the man's inclination. It's saying the man, should he be inclined this way, is the one who needs to be on guard and to make changes in his own behavior. It's a very important idea here, that we're not asking women to be hidden because the man can't control himself. We're asking the man to change what he's doing so that he will not put himself in a place where he finds control more difficult. It is on his shoulders, not hers. And the hyperbole of the final phrase, where they say they have no proportion in the world to come, equivalent of saying has no place in heaven, that is a common rabbinical flourish at the end of something that they are trying to emphasize really, really matters, even though most people don't seem to care. The rabbis will often say such and such has no portion in the world to come if they feel that a lot of people are going to hear this and say, who cares if you're staring at someone's rear when they're going through the river? What harm does it do? Well, the harm that it does is it is going to remove you from the path of good. You are justifying and you are rationalizing behaving in a way that is demeaning and dehumanizing to the other person, but is also dehumanizing to yourself, because you're saying, you know what, I'm just a bundle of animal instincts, and I'm just going to do whatever they tell me to. And wherever that takes me is where it takes me. It turns out that's not going to take you in a good direction. And while the hyperbole of no portion of the world to come is a little strong for the modern ears, certainly if we continue to behave in such a way to allow ourselves to dehumanize others and in the process dehumanize ourselves, then we are going to be pretty far from walking the right path, the path that our Creator has asked us to follow. So with that in mind, we will finish up. As always, I highly recommend you go to Sefaria, wonderful website, or any other source of Jewish texts, look up the sources, study additional commentary. There is always more than we can possibly discuss in any of our classes, and I hope you all continue to study and try to live in that tension that is being a human, of being pulled by both being created, but towards our Creator. Take care, everyone, and have a wonderful day.